Hello everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another live stream here at my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be playing with Distress Oxide inks and kind of playing with them in more of a watercolor fashion. This was a request from Jennifer Fountain. She's one of my premium members here at my YouTube channel. I ask my members fairly often, at least once a month, like, hey, do you have any requests? And this was one that she requested. So today, when I was coming up with an idea for what I wanted to do, I went to my list that I've been compiling and I thought, that sounds interesting. Let's do something with that. I picked out a couple of color palettes of Distress Oxide inks and we'll see how it goes for what the idea was. I've sort of wanted like a kind of like a gradient of like some colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. I think that will make this, well, if not look better, it will be a bit more simple when it comes to kind of getting things to blend. So this is going to be a very, very simple kind of background technique. In fact, I tested it out right before going live and I was like, this isn't going to take very long. So that's when I came up with a second color palette. So we're going to do two of them tonight just because they are so quick to do. So basically I'm going to be doing a direct to paper inking technique and then watercolor with that and sort of get like a striped background effect. So I'm going to start with sponge sugar. And when you're applying it, you want to like think about hitting the top corner of the ink pad. So you're not going to have it like the papers right here. You're going to have it kind of tilted, so only that one side is going to touch the watercolor paper. By the way, the watercolor paper I'm using tonight is, oh, not that one, sorry, wrong one. I'm using Fabriano Artistico Extra White. This is the cold press version. So I'm gonna tip the ink pad, so I'm mostly getting kind of like stripe kind of texture. And that one really needs to be re-inked, so I had to press that pretty hard. But while the ink is still pretty wet, like if I tip it in the light, you can kind of see that it's still wet. I'm grabbing my watercolor brush and I'm just kind of softening that entire area. And then I'm going to add more water to my brush and try to pull that spun sugar down a little bit more. I can even tip my board so that the color might want to start like moving down because of gravity. I'm going to hit this with my heat tool to speed along the drying process so we can move on to the next color. Okay, I think that's mostly dry enough to move on anyway. So now I'm going to go to my next color, which is Picked Raspberry. And once again, I'm going to use the top corner of the ink pad to sort of add color like that. If you want to, you can use the whole surface of the ink pad, but I'm only going for like the top corner. Okay, so when I start to add water to this one, I'm going to add it to just where the ink was applied, and then I'm going to kind of pull it down like I did with the sponge sugar. I'm going to tip my board up a little bit. And then at the tail end, I'm just going to come over here with a wet brush, and I'm going to go over that top line, and that's going to soften it, and then I'm gonna start to pull it down. And just from gravity and starting to pull it down, it's going to soften all of those lines. Add a little more water to my brush, and I just want to come over this area right here one more time just because I really want that to be really soft. I've got like this speck of, I think it's a little bit of a brown hardboard here. It's really annoying. Okay, I got it. There we go. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so you can see more of what's going on. But I really love how the soft edge on the top and bottom really wicks away that color. I think it's so cool. So I'm going to dry this again and then I'll go on to the next color. Not completely dry, but it's close enough to move on. So the next color is Seedless Preserves. All right. And once again, I'm just going to tip my ink pad so only one edge is applied. I'm just trying to get like a good, well, I kind of went a little flat there, but that's okay. I'm going to pick up my board here so I can work with gravity, wetting my brush, and it's going to come in here and wet this entire area. In fact, I'm even going to come up here and kind of get that little bit that kind of squashed onto my board here. I'm going to try to add just lots of water here at the end to kind of get this to fade out as it starts to move to the bottom. I think that's kind of fun is that because oxide inks are water reactive even after they're dry, when I come in with a wet paintbrush and I go like this, it reactivates that picked raspberry and I can start to move it around a little bit. It's really fun. I get those colors to really start moving. We're getting some really cool stripe textures here. All right, I'm gonna hit this with my heat tool. Okay, so I was gonna use Dusty Concord, but I think I'm gonna skip it and I'm gonna go straight to Chip Sapphire. And I'm just gonna add this in right here. I'm also not too concerned about not hitting the bottom of my watercolor paper because I'm going to be cutting this down for a card. So it actually would be better if I don't hit all the way to the bottom because then, you know, I've got room to cut things out. Okay, still going here. All the way to the bottom. And then I'm going to come back to the top and really soften this. And start to move it up. It almost starts to have a little bit of like a faux dip dye look, which I love. Really adding lots of water on here, trying to get the color to really move. Anne's asking, does the oxide texture, the kind of chalky finish, stay after the wet technique? A little bit, like not a ton, but a little bit. I think it'd be really pretty to do stuff like this with like sunset colors. I think that'd be amazing. Okay, so I'm planning to put a greeting on this with gold cardstock. So I'm actually going to do some gold splatter. So I've got my Christmas watercolors from Iuile Watercolors. And as you can see, this gold, I've hit pan. So I'm going to use this other one. This is the color Star. This one is just Christmas gold. But this is just going to add a little bit of sparkle to this. So I'm just going to add some, like 3 drops, maybe 4 drops. I'm going to let that soak in a little bit. And I am eventually on my next one going to do silver. So I'm going to add some drops into silver as well. I am going to do my usual paint splatter technique where I put the paint onto an acrylic block. And that helps me kind of guide where the paint splatter goes. And I scrape my brush right there on the side so that it gathers the paint. That's very fluid. I hope it's going to be stark enough. Okay, and then when I go to do my paint splatter, I just kind of go right off the edge of the block. Getting some really good splatters here, some big ones, which I love. Okay, I'm going to let that dry down. And then it looks a little bit dark right now, but once it's dry, you'll be able to see all that shine from the gold paint. And we'll set this aside for just a little bit. I'm going to move on to my other background. We're going to do a very similar fashion for this one, but we're changing colors. We're going to go Squeezed Lemonade to Cracked Pistachio to Pine Needles to Mermaid Lagoon to Chip Sapphire. So there's 5 colors this time instead of just 4. Okay, by the way, I did want to let you all know that of the Christmas Iuile watercolors that I use, the most often used colors, I've already replaced this one. I just bought a new one of this one, and I've also used the silver quite a bit. They actually sell, Jeannie over at Iuile Watercolors, she sells a set. It's just the half Merry Christmas set. I just ordered it. And it comes with, like, these three are the ones that I use the most, especially for holidays. And then there's also Christmas green. So there's Christmas apple, Christmas silver, Christmas gold, and Christmas green. And there's some of my most used colors from that entire palette. So if you're wanting to try these paints out with like the bigger pans with colors you think you might use more often, this might be a really good set. You could also purchase them just, you know, one pan at a time. You just wouldn't have a tin that comes with it. But I believe she does sell empty tins as well. So anyway, just so you know, once again, that is the half Merry Christmas pan. And when I add the supplies, when I'm done here, I'll add that to the supply list as well. So I'm thinking maybe like this size. Yeah, that'll get all of it. Okay, and just because there's a lot of paint on this and I want to keep my cutting plates clean, I have like a little bit of scratch paper that I've been using when I die cut. Let's put that right there. Okay, oh, it looks like I didn't even need to do that. Well, maybe a little bit. There's a little bit of color right there. Okay. Okay. But also, the other thing that's nice about die cutting after the fact is it really flattens it out. Like, it's completely flat now. And for my greeting for these cards, I decided to do the Simus Stamp Paper Hugs. This is a die that I did for Simon, I think a few years ago. But it's just such a good, like, generic sentiment. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so I've got two cardstocks. I've got silver and gold from Sizzix. These come in like a pack. I think it has like 5 different types of each color. And these are the brushed metal versions. I also started cutting my foam tape instead of just tearing it, especially when it's on like the outer edge of your layers. Just because I think sometimes people get curious. They're like, how did they put that card together? And then they tip it on its side and then they can see where everything was torn. And I'm like, maybe that's not a good look. So I started cutting it so it looks really nice on the sides. Okay. I'm tempted to cut out that Paper Hugs a couple more times so it can be, you know, thicker on the card. But maybe not. All right, I'm going to grab tweezers, add a bunch of adhesive. I'm just trying to make sure I get most areas, especially on the ends or like on the G right here, where there isn't anything attached to it. I want to make sure that I have glue on that area. Putting it in the center, but sort of more near the top. Let's hold that down. And I'm going to take my paperweight and just put that right there on top. So here are the finished cards for tonight. I love how that little paint splatter kind of brings out the greeting, but it still lets the background really shine and take center stage with all the color. Fun way to use some oxide inks. You could do a similar thing with watercolor or regular distress inks. Any of your water reactive ink pads out there, you could do something similar where you're adding the ink directly to the paper and then wetting it with a wet water brush. You could definitely do that. So that is the video for tonight. Thanks so much for joining me. Just want to give you all a heads up that next Monday, have a special live at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. There are giveaways involved. You have to be watching live to win them. So please watch live if you can, and it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining me for this edited live, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.